Is that music? There we go. Should be in desktop audio, I think. Let's see. Alright, so we got Capablanca move by move. Very good. Some calculation. Okay. So for this video, decided to start a video series, Capablanca move by move. So he removes complexity from the position, translates it into plan, which everyone can understand. Actually, should I go for Ivanchuk? No, I think Capablanca. I studied him last March, I think. He's no rival. Yeah, exactly. Okay, but anyway. Minimalist that wins by single tempos many times. Aiming for peace, harmony, activity over structure. And so that's a very important way to play the game. Peace, harmony over structure, I think. He was very good at tactics between 1917 and 1927. He had many little combinations. And he was good at calculations at a grand scale. And so there are three Capablancas. There's the young adventurer between 1901 and 1915. There's the mid-years, where he was uncontested. This was between 1916 and 1927. And then there's the final period from 1928 to his death in 1942. And he's a very cautious and super positional player. I think during this time he was very, very cautious and he wanted to draw quite a lot. He's kind of changed after he lost the World Championship. Yeah, apparently, yeah, I agree with the author. He's well, actually, for my opinion, I think he's just incredible. Probably the best player in history, in my opinion. And so this book is an interactive format where things can be covered in such a good way. Okay. And so game one. And so game one is between Juan Corzo y Principi versus Jose Raul Capablanca. And so he was his early rival. He was actually, I think, the champion of Cuba at the time. This game is covered quite a bit in many YouTube videos, I think. And I've seen this, covered a bit, and at least these Corzo match games. There's many of these games, and they're very, very well recognized. And so he was the early rival, and he became one of his best fans. And so for this particular game, Corzo started out with pawn to e4. This is a very popular move at the time, and they didn't know much back then in terms of d4. That wasn't really until maybe maybe 1918, 1920. I don't know, but I think they played d4 later, like mostly 1920s, 1930s or so. But e4 was very widely used. It's seen quite a bit between Steinitz, Jakorn, and I think Steinitz actually had a particularly big effect on Jose Raul Capablanca because he, Steinitz Capablanca, I think, studied some of Steinis's games. Um, you know, and he's actually one of the best practitioners of his principles at the time. And so Steinis's principles, I think, included, but are not limited to. I'm not sure. There's the particular book is downstairs, but I think I have a list. I can grab a list of Steinis's principles for the record of this particular video. Chess. And so there are some 10 fundamental Steinis principles that Capablanca was very, very extremely good at using. And so, where's the knights before bishops? I thought that was one of them. Okay, basically it's this list. Basically it's this list. I'm going to steal this screen. Hello, Saltigo. Happy holidays, Saltigo. It's been so long. How is everything? I was doing Capablanca. I remember you covered him. He was in your series, the Monsters, right? The Monsters series, the something with monsters. Forget. You can remind me if you're. But yeah, yeah, Capablanca. I remember you covered him, and for me, he's my favorite particular player simply because I liked studying him in my development, and I just like copying his play, kind of at least when I started chess. Except back, I did play e4, and I still do. Actually, you know what's? It's really interesting. I went full circle. Now I play e4, and so yeah, it's quite the thing. I hope I wasn't too late in reading the chat. I was a little bit occupied, but anyway, but yeah, happy holidays, Sotigo. It's good to see you. So anyway, Steinis's principles, and so I probably should turn this down. This is a very good music though for the time. Oh, I turned the desktop audio off. Okay, maybe my mic is too loud then. Sorry if yeah, that's okay. I'll I'll pause this song for now for the point of going over these principles of Wilhelm Steinitz. And so this is actually in also this positional chess for club players book, which is downstairs. But rather, okay, so the permanent advantages of this particular way of playing is there's this material advantage first, there's weak squares second. Weak squares as in maybe you can use it as an outpost, you can occupy it with a piece, you can blockade something. That's pretty much a weak square. Like for example, if you have two pawns next to each other and you push one of them, it weakens the whole coordination of squares. And so that is weak squares. And so next is pass pawns. Pass pawns, that is a positional advantage, and sometimes, often in the middle game, it is a good advantage to have to tie down pieces. And so it always is threatening the queen on a particular square. Um, the weak pawns, of course, and so there is weak pawns as in, for example, if there's a pawn undefended, right, and they can only be defended by a piece, that could be considered weak. Okay, um, for example, a pawn on c3 or something. Like say there's an isolated pawn on c3, and that is a weak pawn. Or if there is an open diagonal or file, that is a permanent advantage. Like bishop pair, stuff like that, and also of course bishop pair. And so those are some permanent advantages, and they're stable. You can get some good play. Oh, nice. Here's your link. Theory Steinitz. Oh, you got it. You got the link. Oh wait, Hart. Oh wait, hold on. My chat is a little bit funky. Link this page. This is your link. Okay. UK Steinitz. Let's check this one out. This is probably more interesting. I'll share you with this link. This one is a good one. Yeah, and actually, Soltego, you're pretty good at these principles. I remember watching your games. Very classical style, and that's why I'm always a fan. So anyway, yeah, and so this is very good. I like this. At the beginning of the game, forces stand in equilibrium. I like the wording of this actually. And so, wow, look at this. He's got all these references. I think this is a very classical way. Significance of Stein's theory for a club player. I see. I like it. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna go back to these positional advantages. So those are the permanent ones. Now, for temporary advantages, if you have these, you have to attack. Otherwise, the advantage is going to dissipate. And so the first advantage of this is development. If you're ahead in development, you gotta attack. Otherwise, your opponent will equalize in development, and they'll get time, right? Next one is positional pieces. And so if you have good aggressive squares and positions, you gotta convert it somehow, sometime, right? Like, for example, you could play knight f5, right? Attack, stuff like that. Get a strong attack with that knight on f5. And I think Kasparov once said that if you get a knight out f5, the game is won. Of course, that is referring to specific positions in particular. Okay, and so next is the center. Temporary advantages of the center. Yeah, so the center can be attacked and undermined. Pawn breaks like c5, pawn breaks like e5. You know, that can definitely be attacked. And then finally, the last one is space. And so you can have a space advantage. Perhaps you have this nice c4, d5, e4 pawn structure. And then black has some d6, e5 thing going on. Then with the space advantage, then you've got to attack and perhaps play c5, open the position, and break through, attack and contact with the d6. Touches upon Lasker's updated version. Okay, let's get yeah. So that's just a quick overview of this. And there was another thing I wanted to mention. Just before we go to that update. Position the pieces, center space. Okay, and so John Watson writes, there are two ways to counter a space advantage. And so, what is it? The stockfish is very highly value of has a high value of the space advantage. And so I'm just gonna write this down for the so for the space advantage, there's two ways to counter this from John Watson's book. It's one, counter counter blow to the center. That actually, I think, is a misconception, Satego. That's why I'm glad you brought that up. I want to get this important point out here, though. And two, dynamic play. So these are written in John Watson's chess strategy book. These two things. But I think that really depends for exchanging pieces because sometimes you can actually exchange your way, but you still have some problems to solve. For example, I think I am referencing Rubinstein. I don't know if I can find the exact game. I probably can't. There's 36 games in this particular study that I'm looking for. But anyway, and so let me think. Yeah, and so in this particular study, I think this is a Rubinstein move by move. There is a particular issue. I think it's with this bishop to b5 semi-Tarrasch defense opening. Wait. Maybe was it this one? Oh, wow, look at this. I found it. Look at this. I just got right into the game. Okay, so here's the thing when it's not necessarily good to exchange pieces. So black has the space advantage. White has the center. They control the fourth rank here. I am doing it using the trackpad, but this is pretty much the space advantage. And so after bishop takes on d2, queen takes, right? Okay, black has exchanged some pieces, but I think black is not very good here. And you're going to see this really interesting move. This is invented by Akiba Rubinstein. He plays bishop to b5 here. And really the purpose of this is to, so for one, black is wasting time here. There's going to be some weaknesses that are going to be made. Um, and so a6, yeah. And now let's look at some variations. So b6 that does weaken the light scores. There's already rook c1 going to rook c7. That's not very safe. And yeah, we got king e3. This is really stable and really strong. And so on a6, he's going back to bishop d3. He's weakened this a6 square, now the b7. So how's he going to develop that bishop on b7 in a good way that doesn't weaken? Like, he can't play b6 like that one variation, right? That we showed. The a6, the a7 pawn can't go backwards. a6 pawn can go backwards. Like, if I was black, I wanted to play a7, a6, a7, but I can't do that. So rook d8, rook c1, b5. Yeah, and so Rubinstein's gonna look at he takes the 7th rank. All right, so where I think really okay, maybe exchanging. I don't know if exchanging is gonna help here, and also Yeah, I think there's just better piece quality. But okay, maybe early in the game, I think I want to. I think well, let's go through the game first, and then I'll just mention more about that particular concept. And so yeah, this is just a side variation. This is very strong. This bishop is really bad here. So the pieces are exchanged, but White's got incredible activity. There's already like knight h6, and there's this idea. They can try g takes f6, but this still is troublesome. They got knight d3 going to c4. This e6 pawn is weak, and there's just so much going on here. This is hanging almost like this is a very tough position. And so after pawn to h6, there's pawn to f4, and then there's bishop to e8. Now another particular idea could be g5, and there's this rook. There's a skewer kind of here almost. Okay, maybe king g7 is an idea, but still, this is okay. Wait, king g7. There's just rook takes f6, and then there's d7 hanging. So this is yeah. So Rubinstein he has this huge space advantage, and all of his pieces are just better the entire game pretty much. Like he tries rook d8, okay, but f6, okay. There's this, but yeah, this is really tough. This is not an easy position. And so there's this idea. You can try like this, and yeah. So now White starts cashing in here. He just uses the space advantage and starts cashing in. And his opponent just starts to I guess his opponent collapsed right here, but I guess really I'm gonna so my big takeaway though is I think it's a misconception. It really is a case by case kind of thing, if exchanging pieces actually reduces the advantage. I think most often than not it's true, but I think it always depends. So here I think bishop here is wrong. Bishop b4 and oh no, queen a5, this is wrong. Queen a5, that's the wrong move here. And that was what was titled. This was titled a question mark in the book. I remember. And so this is really. I guess it depends, and it depends which pieces. I guess it's always some case by case sort of thing to think about. But anyway, sorry about that tangent. This is just sort of to get more into perspective, the space advantage in these principles, which are still being developed, kind of. And so now let's get back to the other thoughts. So all right. So we've been through each of those principles, and we've established dynamic piece play and a counter blow to the center are what counter space advantage. So now let's look at more at the detail of theory Steinitz. So equilibrium, right? The equal is position. Correct play on both sides is draw, and therefore, right anyone can win as it's an error, and that's more often the case. Attack, yes, should succeed. And another thing to point on to this is the pawns don't go backwards, so we're kind of it's easier to attack anyway. Um, it's almost like shogi, right? Shogi. I never played it, but apparently people throw pieces at each other. Um, and so as long as the keeper is in attack, however skillful, cannot succeed against the correct defense. Such a defense will eventually necessitate withdrawal and a grouping of attacking pieces, and the attacker will inevitably suffer a disadvantage. Therefore, a player should not attack till it already has an advantage caused by the opponent's error that justifies the decision to attack. I see. So at the beginning of the game, a player should not at once seek to attack. Instead, a player should disturb the equilibrium in his favor by inducing the opponent to make an error. I see. Before attacking, right? Like weakening. Okay, that's an interesting thought. I'm not so sure it's as relevant though for modern chess. I think I don't know it's something to be looked at. And so when a sufficient advantage has been obtained, a player must attack or the advantage will dissipate. Yes, and that is very correct. Number 7 is important here. And so this is some good notes. And so this is a good touch upon these principles. And so why am I bringing this up? Because Capablanca was in my opinion, he was actually one of the best practitioners of these specific principles of Steinitz. And so when he was a kid, he used to study some of the games of Steinitz, I think. Stuff like that. I don't know if there was a tournament in Cuba or something. I cannot remember exactly, but yeah, I think that's he picked up some of the stuff from Steinitz and stuff like that, and he's actually one of the best users of that formula. I think because here's the problem with Steinitz: he overused his principles and he was playing too defensive at sometimes just to prove a point, right? Like where he's grabbing material and then he's grabbing material and he cashes back in, and it's not necessarily to be desired. I think. Oh, what's up? What's up, Chess Kudo? Space advantage, you don't want to exchange pieces unless you can convert it into a better advantage as winning endgame. Yes, exactly. And so that's a weird thing. So sometimes you can just exchange, but the disadvantage remains. And that comes down to weak squares, stuff like that. It's really the specifics of the position. Um, and so yeah, I was actually thinking of doing Capablanca. Jose Raul Capablanca is my favorite, favorite player, and so I've always had this idea in the back of my mind, at least when I started streaming, to make or go through each of the games in this book. And so the thing is, I've read this book maybe 3 times. It's a really, really enjoyable book, and I've gone through lots of his games. I have 3 whole studies on here. And that's why good attacking players have to be good at endgames, right? Because there's a lot of converting. Yes, exactly. If the opponent's defense, right? If they defense well, that's gonna be tough. Yeah. And so, but yeah, Capablanca. This I think that's the player I really wanted to make lots of videos on. Actually, when I started YouTube in 2017, actually. But anyway, back to stay on topic. So. So this is Juan Corzo versus Jose Raul Capablanca. And so yeah, so Capablanca was one of the best people that used these principles. And so this is him at a younger age, of course. And so back then, this is 1901. So back then, there was still in this new kind of or this raw beginning of positional play. And so e4, e5. And so for this particular game, I remember okay, so they played a King's Gambit game before this, and I think Corzo mentioned he was going to play something different than he did the last time. I wonder if it reads that in his text. It might. Um, but see, so knight c6. So knight f6 is another way. But I guess yeah. The point is you can play d5. That's the thing. Yeah. So this is Vienna game. Okay. So Vienna game. Here's the thing. You can actually consider playing g3. Where's my trackpad thing? Okay. So you can consider g3 and you can consider f4 or even bishop c4. These are some of these ideas. Bishop c4 and d3. There's 3 main ideas in this kind of thing. And so Capablanca plays knight c6. And so, interestingly enough, um, in this book that I've read, this is correct, right? f4, d5, I think. Um, wait, knight f6, f4. I think f4 is the most aggressive way to deal with knight f6. Now, in this book of Vienna, most people either they recommend this, or there's bishop c4 and d3. But I think g3, right? They go for g3, and I actually have some interesting preparation for this particular line. Although it's not necessarily my style of the Vienna game, but yeah, g3 is probably the modern way to play this position. I think in Corzo's case. But anyway, so yeah, and I know King's Crusher is a big fan of this. And so e takes f4, knight to f3, pawn to g5. And so this is very important. So Capablanca, I think this is a good way to punish this. He's holding on to this pawn. I'm going to grab some ginger ale. Yeah, but so Capablanca is holding on to this f4 pawn, and so there is some merit to this. Like, okay, so maybe you can play g5, influencing the center in these 2 squares. That's one thing. And I remember when I was a beginner, I've tried that idea a little bit, and I've gotten burned quite a few times simply because this f4 pawn drops and I have a bunch of weak squares on the king side. And so I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, there's going to be some huge trouble to dealing with this King's Gambit. And I remember I always struggled against this as a beginner. Or, I mean, this is a Vienna, but it's still King's Gambit. Um, and so, yeah, and here's another advantage. The thing is, like, yeah, the Vienna game actually cuts out quite a bit of options. For example, if e4, e5, f4, they can take on f4. Let's say they go knight f3. You can play this nice h6 idea. This is called the backer defense. This is recommended by John Nunn in playing the open game, I think. That might be the book. Open games or something. Um, and so h6, and so the idea is pawn to g5. And so maybe we'll go for bishop c4 here, or pawn to d4, and then we can go pawn to g5, I think. I wonder if this is still, are we still in, yeah. And so black does actually pretty well with this. Let's just show some book examples from light chess, actually. Okay, queen e7. I think knight e7 also is possible, is it? Okay, maybe not. Sometimes I like to play also to provoke d5 in some cases, right? Oh, actually, yeah, knight c6 does try to do that. Yeah, and okay, maybe this is more balanced than I thought, but anyway, yeah. So backer defense is a very interesting way to take on this, I think, and that's only possible with this move order, I think, or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But now with knight committing to c6, I think the situation is a little bit different. Like for example, let's go f4. Now I don't think pawn takes f4, knight f3, and h6 is as good, is it? Let's check, see if it's, yeah, white does very well here. For example, look at the score here. This is really bad for black. So you see, move order matters, and so that's why there's some venom to this Vienna game. There's, if you're playing e4, you gotta watch out for this. This has got some poison because you commit them forward. Um, Sounds like music to your ears. Yeah. Hopefully, I'm not too loud. If I'm too loud, let me know. I don't know how this volume is. I apologize if that would be the case. Um, it's all right. Okay. All right. Maybe or all right. I'll just leave it at this, or I'll move it up middle. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So pawn to g5 here, and so now h4 is played. Okay. So pawn to h4, interesting. So white is already attacking these pawns. Is there a good way to defend this? I don't think so, right? I don't think we can play h6 because we weaken the we weaken the light square diagonal on g8 via g8, 8, a2. And so that is a big issue. H6, there's the pin. If you play h6, just pawn takes. Yeah, and here's another thing. The backer defense is not possible, right? Like, if I go like this, I can't play my backer defense. They can just go like this, and then all of a sudden, whoops. And so when I was a beginner, I lost a lot of games simply because I tried to play the backer defense, but it couldn't work. And so that's why this Vienna game has got some good venom to it. And so pawn to g5, so h4. Capablanca has to go forward here. He's got to play g4 here. This is the only move to challenge this. And so really, I guess the question is, can white win back that pawn and retain all of the strong weak, or be able to attack all the weak squares on the king side that from black overextending, right? So I guess technically, like, if this pawn is gone, all these dark squares are just doomed. It's going to be Swiss cheese on the king side. Okay, so now h6. Oh, yeah. So h6 doesn't work. Okay, so anyway, pawn to g4. And so now this knight is going to g5. Now, have I missed? I'm just going to check and see if I've missed any good annotations to bring up on the first page. So I guess it mentions that the game has transposed to a line of the King's Gambit. And so Capablanca was 12 years old at this time. And Corzo, okay, a century ago, this line was very dangerous for black. Nowadays, it's no problem. So the only reason the King's Gambit is playable is because black has about 10 good lines, but he can only play one at a time. That's actually why it's okay. And I think that was mentioned by GM Nigel Short. So that's a nice quote on this. So knight to g5 is played. Pawn to h6 plays it, very sturdy kind of move. I would, with it, you got to do that kind of hand motion. Oh, let's see what Kudo has mentioned. So isn't bishop e7 already ignoring? You have to defend g4 first, so why does h6 not work? Okay, so which move are you referring to, Chess Kudo? You have to let me know. So Let's check. Did I skip over bishop e7? Was it this? Oh yeah, I kind of went through this very, very quickly. Did I? Or this was just, yeah, this is just the light chess game that I did not understand. This is I think this is just not fun to look at. Yeah, bishop e7. This is not good. This is not good. Were you referring to that line? Okay, yeah, after knight g5, h6 has to be played, of course. Okay, h6, knight g5. After knight g5, h6 has to be played. Right, right, of course. Yeah, so we got to play this sturdy, you know. I don't know if you see Kasparov like move the pawn. He's like, mm, like that. And so we get this pawn to h6. And so now white plays knight takes f7, king takes f7. Um, Apparently, okay, well now there's pawn to d4 here. And so white's got some good stuff going on. Now, in the text, it mentions white gets good compensation for the piece if they go queen takes g4 here. So let's go back. Just for visual purposes, white display queen takes g4. Now let's see. Wait, what does it say? Okay, here's a good question. Why don't we play f6 instead of h6? I definitely recorded this particular line wrong. Yes. Yeah, I recorded a line wrong. So I apologize for that. So f6. There's queen takes g4 here. h5, queen f5. And now after knight c e7, trying to kick everything and save the game. Queen takes f4. There's some really good compensation. The bishop's going to c4, maybe, or something like. Okay, maybe pawn. Okay, what's wrong with pawn takes g5? Just is it? Am I missing something? What does this say here? This can't be that bad, is it? Apparently it says this is equal. Black is like very slightly better, but barely. Yeah, okay, I guess that's the point. F takes g5 is like, okay, they go F, so they win the piece. I guess this is just tough practically, right? Because this king's exposed and there's always some issues, like bishop c4. Over the board, this is going to be tough. You gotta really hold things together here, and it's not clear, I guess, what a good plan is. Like, okay, so the knight on g6 is holding things. The rook is committed to this h pawn. But I think f7 is going to be a problem at least at some point. F7, you gotta maybe castle queenside or something if you can. But yeah, and yeah, it's going to be tough. So that's why h6 was played. And so now he's got to go forward. Knight takes f7, king takes f7, and pawn to d4. And okay, so I did record this right. I guess I just didn't add that line. And so another possibility was queen takes g4, just like before, and after knight f6, queen takes f4, and bishop d6. And so here's the thing: Black is developing a lot. The queen's got to move. He's got some good pawns. The king's in the center, but I think Black is fighting here. And what's the evaluation here? Shaky compensation. That's what it says for the piece. And so now another one is bishop c4 check. But here's the thing: when you're heading to material, you always have the advantage of giving back material to get back into development. And so pawn to d5. Boom. Look at that. Any questions? Yeah, this is good for black. Awesome. d5 bishop e6. Yes, you got to play d5 bishop e6. Um, so now bishop takes d5. Okay. King G7 apparently is, well, that's what was played. And I guess you could do, I mean, the bishop is developed. Bishop E6 is another way though. Let's check. Does it work? So bishop E6. So it didn't like it at first, but it still says black's about equal here almost, right? This is about equal. Maybe queen takes G4, is it? Is that the problem? Queen takes G4? But king F7, queen takes F4. I guess this is just a little shaky, just a little bit, but you know what? I respect ambitiousness. Maybe queen F6. Let's check. Yeah, queen F6. Queen F6, right, exactly. Yeah, and so this is maybe queen takes there, but then we're developing stuff, right? Maybe king E8. I mean, we're developing. He's taking our pawns, but we've got an army. I don't know. Definitely interesting concept to look at. Yeah, C7 drops. Yeah, C7 drops. 95 before queen takes B7. Always with these interesting new thoughts on this position. 95. Let's check. 95. Where's 95 here? Okay, queen takes B7. So queen takes C7. Oh, 95. I see. I see. 95 is a little scary, but okay. Well, we could just take on a 4. Oh, queen to C7 then 95. Is this that bad? Is it that bad? But I thought we have some stuff. We got queen D6, right? Or bishop D6. Okay, queen D6 probably. Queen G6, apparently. I don't know. This doesn't seem that bad. We got always rook B8. Oh yeah, queen takes E4. E4 is always an idea. You can take here. This is very very interesting that one. Anyway, pawn to D4, pawn to D5. So now there's E takes D5, queen E7 check, king to F2. Okay, so let's go back to this game. So we looked at bishop c4. So I guess these are just some ideas of this position. So they can take on g4 and go for the shaky compensation after knight takes on f7, or they could go bishop c4 and just try developing this way. And this is a very very interesting. This is a very very interesting variation here. I think I didn't cover all of this. King g7, d4, right? Just developing bishop d6, holding onto the pawn. Pawn takes. Now we got some double pawns. So now there's some structural deficiencies. The bishop is going to go to b4, and maybe it's almost like opposite color bishop scenario here, right? So light squares, what? Black is the light squares, white is the dark squares, and it's a bit shaky, right? The king's a bit shaky. Maybe white's getting to the f file first, but I think black's pieces are in the game. But again, structural advantage goes to white. So it's a really interesting. There's always these shiftings of this evaluation and the ways to evaluate these positions, and so that's always some nice things to have some thoughts of. So anyway, pawn to d5 was played. Queen a6 didn't look forced. I go too fast. I'm sorry. Go back. I'll go back. Sorry. Where is it? Queen a6 didn't look forced. Bishop c4 check. Which one didn't look forced? Is it queen a6? Oh, I don't have to? Okay, okay. 97. Yeah, I think habitually, like, the thing is, I play lots of blitz, so I think I kind of I quickly evaluate these. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, but it kind of reduces calculation, but also messes up play. So pawn to d5. So Capablanca plays this to give back material, but to get development in exchange. And so e takes d5 is played. Bishop takes f4 looks better than Corzo's choice. Even here, white is hard pressed to prove it gets full compensation. I see. This is Corzo's. Okay, so this is probably the better move. It's almost like, you know, we're getting development. There's pressure in the center. King is still on f7. E takes d5. This is Corzo's choice, and I guess he's thinking white's gonna lose some time here. I mean, he's thinking black's gonna lose some time here. And so queen e7 check. King f2. Bishop e2 can be played. But interestingly enough, we have f3, g takes f3, g takes f3, and they can pin. But now we have queen takes h4. King is going to g7. Bishop, king is going to g7, and he can't really check us on the dark squares. Like, okay, rook takes f3, king g7, maybe bishop f4 or something. Right, rook takes f3, knight f6. Rook takes f3, knight f6, pawn takes c6. We have perpetual. Oh no, no, we don't. Why does it say queen takes forward? Oh, yeah, queen takes d4. Check is the threat. Okay, I see. What does it say here? Oh, I have to go to the next page. Oh, this is Corzo's improvement over. This is his unsound variation. He played this in the game before, and actually, Capablanca got a winning position in this game with this variation. All right, so here's a really interesting story about this game. Here's the position of the previous game. So, yeah. So, in the previous game, bishop e2 is played. f3. Takes. Castle's pinning. Queen takes h4. And so, Corzo analyzed the position and told someone that he should have played king f2. Capablanca, when he heard this, he analyzed the situation himself and decided to play it again, as he thought that black should win with the continuation that he put in practice in this game. So this is very sneaky. So the prodigy went home and began studying and came up with this fantastic idea in the real game. And so yeah, this is the past game. And then after this past game, Corzo was like, okay, I should have played king f2. And that's what was played here. Okay, good night, Kudo. I appreciate you watching and supporting. You're really real. One of the realest. Probably the only realist person. You know, I think it says you're my only viewer. Good night. Alright, anyway. So king f2 is played. In any case, I'm still going to go through this anyway. Just because I enjoy Capablanca. So king f2 is played. And pawn g3 check was played. The king goes to g1. And now Capablanca has this really interesting concept. I wonder, for the viewer, maybe pause this position. What do you think white or black would play in this particular line? How does white stabilize this situation here? So this knight on c6 is under attack. All the pieces are spectators. The king is a little suspiciously placed. The bishop can be coming to c4 and threatening like pawn d6 check. Bishop can go to d3, and the queen can go to like h5. There's lots of ideas. I guess maybe one issue with White's position is that rook is going to be a little bit of a spectator on h1. Maybe that bishop, the pawn could be b3, bishop a3 is one point at some points. But anyway, despite all of this, Capablanca has decided to do what he's very good at, and he's good at changing the position. Um, and so at this time period, this is very rare to do such a thing. I think to give back material in a very Steinitzian way and fight for the initiative. Because it wasn't necessarily about the initiative back then. It was more about these long combinations and these weird attacks. And so after King to G1, Capablanca played knight takes d4. And so queen takes d4 is played. And another way this could have been played, bishop takes f4 is possible. Like, white can decline this, right? But bishop takes f4, then there's knight f5, and then queen h4, king g7, queen g there, rook king there. This rook can attack on g3. Where does it? Rook h3 to make air for the king. Knight f6, attacking the queen. Knight f6. Queen f3. Rook g8. And this is overprotection of this pawn. Bishop to d3. And king h8. Getting out of the pit, simply. And now for this position, it seems it's the material advantage is consolidated. The initiative for white has come to an end. And so maybe the bishop's coming to d7, the rook's coming to e8. White's better here. Plain and simple. So back to the game. Pawn g3 check was played, king g1, knight takes d4, queen takes d4. And so now we have come to Capablanca's brilliant idea. This particular game. Queen c5. And so now the queens are going to come off, and Capablanca is just taking over the initiative immediately. Knight e2. So Corzo, I think this is a very uncomfortable position for Corzo. Right, because how's he going to develop that bishop on c1? How's he going to... I mean, he could develop the... Okay, if he exchanges queens, he's going to get mated. So he's really got nothing else. His pieces are not developed. I think he's just... Capablanca... Okay, maybe Capablanca's pieces aren't developed either. But I guess the argument is that white's got some initiative. And the pawn... Okay, let's see. Let's evaluate this position here. King safety. Kings are about equal here. Material. 3 pawns, 6 pawns, 3 pawns, 6 pawns. Material's equal. Bishop pair, knight, rook. Okay, yeah. Equal material. King safety, I think. Possibly... Black's king is a little bit more active. Okay, so here's the thing. We're going to an endgame. And so king's safety changes to king activity. That's the difference between an endgame and the middle game evaluation of the king. What else? Weaknesses. C2 is a weakness, C7 is a weakness, F4 is a weakness, F4 is a weakness. That rook on H1 is doing nothing. Okay, that's separate piece activity. But anyway, I don't really think there's many weaknesses though. This is a really weird position. I don't think there's any there's no good attackable weaknesses. Maybe bishop to f5 to attack c2. But that can be defended with like bishop d3 or some kind of move like that. Right now, I don't think there's weaknesses. Okay, maybe like g2, but we'll see anyway. But yeah. What else? Piece activity. White's got less piece activity simply because that rook on h1 is not developing very anytime soon. That bishop c1 is trapped by the f4 pawn. And so black is slightly better here, in my opinion. So 92 is played. Now what's the move? 92. Queen b6. And so Capablanca is already threatening bishop c5. And so Corzo's got to make the decision here. It's got to deal with bishop c5. The queen's already pinned. He can't afford to get mated. Like if he takes on f4 with the bishop c5. Ouch. So he's going to take on b6. Here's another problem. If Corzo plays pawn b4, this is a very radical way of stopping bishop c5. Bishop takes b4, bishop e3, f takes e3, queen takes h8, so you can win the rook. But now, after bishop f8, Capablanca's got a very, very good initiative here. He's already threatening to trap the queen, kind of, almost. For example, like bishop d7, you know, that's very dangerous, forking. He's probably going to retreat or something. Like maybe, I guess really the question is, where's a good square to retreat to? If you go queen to d4, perhaps bishop to g7 is an idea anyway. This is not a good position. So let's see, queen e5, okay, and yeah, bishop d6. And so that g3 pawn is defended, this queen's losing some time. Black is better. It's plain and simple. So queen takes b6, a takes b6. And now knight d4 is played. After the queen exits, the knight proves to be an unreliable understudy. That's what the annotation has said here. Yeah, good night, Kudo. Let's see. So bishop c5, just simply pinning the knight. Pawn c3. And now rook a4. So now Capablanca is threatening rook takes on d4, pawn takes on d4, bishop takes d4, and it's going to be me. This is very difficult to deal with. Bishop e2 is played. He's just giving his king some escape squares. So after rook takes d4, pawn takes d4, bishop takes d4, he is king f1. Anyway, he still goes for bishop takes d4 and rook takes d4. And so Capablanca's got some really good coordinated pieces. Black's the pawn up. Why does the bishop pair? The rook is still on h1. I think this is actually kind of decisive for black. That rook has just been doing nothing on h1 for the whole game. And like the knight's coming to f6. I guess the plan is really easy. Like he can take on d5 already too. That rook takes d5 is already a threat, kind of. And so Corzo, he plays pawn to b3. Does this solve all of his problems? I don't know. Here's an issue. He's starting bishop e2, and that just skewers the rooks, right? And this doesn't look very good for black. So knight f6 was played. Bishop e2. Rook d2. And now Capablanca is like, okay, I'm forking your rooks. What are you going to do? And Corzo, he does what he can do. He plays the only forcing move in the position. Bishop h5 check. And now, for those of you watching this, Here's an exercise. It looks like white has managed to develop and now hopes to grab some initiative. What should black do about it? Should black just play king g7 or something and just let himself be pinned, and maybe bishop to e5 and rook f1, just taking f4 pawn, and forking c7 and f4? Are we gonna allow that actually? Like that's another thing. Like king g7, then we allow like bishop e5, and that's just a little bit annoying. And all of a sudden, black's losing some pawns. The pawn on g3 becomes weaker. It's less of a thorn pawn. Maybe white's equalizing. Well, for those of you who paused the video and have watched this, knight takes h5 was played. And so the point is, after bishop takes h8, Capablanca has this pawn f3 idea. Clearance, right? The whole tactics is about clearance here. And so he's realized that g2 is a weakness, right? If we evaluate this position, there's really 3 times in the game you have to evaluate the position. The first time is after the opening. The second time, I think I have to review my notes on this actually. The second time you evaluate a position is... When is the second time you evaluate a position? I have to find my notes on this. Where are my notes on the second time of evaluating a position? The second time you evaluate a position is after massive exchanges. So this includes at least 3 minor pieces on both sides. So there's once you're out of the book. Second, after massive exchanges. This includes like 3 minor. Okay, yeah. So this is some interesting concepts. Or even like before sacrifice, like on your side or your opponent's sacrifice. And of course, before you reach an end game. Really, it's after different stages of the game, right? I think that's an interesting thing. So now, Capablanca, so when we evaluate it, he's identified at this end game, when he's evaluated this, that g2 is weak, d5 is weak, and also he's evaluated that f4 is weak for black, and probably c7 is weak. And so by this train of thought, if we're tracing this, he logically concludes that he has to play like this. He's got to take this pawn and then play this. And so what this move does is it removes this weakness, this fixed pawn from f4, and he's cleared the f4 square, and he's already threatening rook g2 check. Rook takes g2 check. So this is actually a really brilliant way of dealing with this. It's combining position and tactics. And so now after g takes f3, Capablanca plays knight to f4. And so already, this is a very strong initiative. He plays bishop e5. Another variation could have been rook c1, attacking c7. That's one weakness. And so notice how these things we've evaluated the position with, like our weaknesses, this kind of dictates motivations of what moves to make. So there's rook f2, rook takes there, bishop d7. And here's the problem. We're threatening knight e2 mate. That's the problem. No matter what white does, it's lost. Like just rook takes d7, then just king to e8, covering any entry points like the e7 square. He can't play rook e7 to cover knight e2 mate. That's this interesting point. So anyway, back to the game. So knight f4 is played. Bishop e5. Rook g2 check. And now here's another thing. We're, again, running into this mating theme. If he goes king g1, then it's knight e2 mate. So he's going king here. And now Capablanca forks the bishop. And yeah, now he's just pushing this pawn forward. And he resigned actually after knight d3. The opponent resigned here. This is where the opponent resigned. This is how play can continue. Yeah, and so he can just get 2 minor pieces for the rook. And he's already threatening rook 1. I think maybe, and sometimes. Or no, he's already threatening knight f3 to check. Like king a1, just rook staying on the 7th, and then just knight f3 is still coming. And so really, what's another takeaway that I can get from this if I'm moving too fast? And so yeah, that's a really interesting idea here. And so why is bishop e5 played? Is there another idea? Is there any way you could get out of this? Is rook e1 played? I don't know. I don't think there's any way to get out of this. I mean, g takes f3, knight f4. Bishop e5, he's just forcing this knight to go somewhere. But is there any other move he could play? So let's say bishop here. This is oddly enough like a forced mate. Like let's say here. 92. This is very, very dangerous. As a mate, and if he takes on h3, rook here. So really, there's no way out of this. Unfortunately, this position is lost. There's not much you can do. And so now let's go through a quick summary of this game. Let's go through. So e4, e5, begin a game, and we get queen e7, knight takes d4, that exchange, and now Capablanca is a slightly more active and better position. Rook a4, bishop takes there, knight f6, rook here, knight takes, f4, f3, clearance for f4, and this tactic is forced. So I guess really if we look at the game as a whole, it's actually quite simple. So let's see. Yeah, it says Capablanca only spent 5 minutes the entire game. So I think this is very impressive. This is a very impressive performance for Jose Raul Capablanca. And so good luck with your chess, and good luck. Thank you all for watching. Good luck with your chess, and bye for now.